My next point is about, again, not by way of a criticism of utilitarianism, but rather more of a drawing out of its implications to help you to think through your own stand on this powerful and embracing ethical theory. Think about the nature of punishment. Think about our very familiar, all too familiar system of punishment, in particular as carried out by legal institutions, prisons, etc. If you consider on the face of it, there's something prima facie kind of paradoxical about the idea of punishment. As I mentioned to you before, when I was a kid, I'd get in fights with my brothers, and one or the other, my parents would say, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Just because he punched you doesn't mean it's okay for you to punch him back, etc. And there's something right in my parents' precept that just because a harm has been done, that doesn't make it okay to inflict another harm. But from a certain perspective, you might say punishing is kind of paradoxical because somebody has done a crime, they say have broken the law, and now we're going to, and in so doing, this person might have caused somebody harm, okay, might have taken something from somebody and caused that person, the victim, to suffer, for example. But in so doing, in punishing that person, we're causing more harm. We're causing the perpetrator to suffer. Why is that a reasonable thing to do? How does that go beyond the fairly unsophisticated idea of an eye for an eye? How does that go beyond, how is that consistent with the fact that we don't think the 2 wrongs make a right? Well, traditionally there have been 3 general types of justifications that philosophers, legal theorists, and others have developed for the idea that we might want to punish a criminal, that is a person that we know to have violated a law. One is what's known as retribution, where retribution suggests that somehow the person who's done the crime is, in a sense, deserving of some kind of suffering, incarceration, for example, in some cases maybe the loss of their life, that somehow they owe us, even beyond perhaps repaying the debt that they owe us if they've taken something that's got some value. Nevertheless, beyond that, they owe us a certain kind of good, and the only way to give us back that good is for them to suffer. Another way to think about retribution might be as follows, that we owe them, the criminal, out of respect as a fellow person, the opportunity to regain their value as a fellow human being, and in so doing, we are going to give them, so to speak, metaphorically, a very tough scrub brush and allow them to scrub themselves clean, and if they can't do it themselves, we will help them. And that way of thinking about it, we are paying respect to the criminal by punishing them, not just the victim, but the criminal, because this gives them a chance to make amends. That's the 2 different flavors of the retributivist theory of the justification for punishment. Another general approach to the justification for punishment goes under the general rubric of deterrence. Deterrence is, as you can imagine, keep people from doing that kind of thing now that a crime has been committed. And deterrence falls into 2 general categories, special and general. Special deterrence is just, we punish you because this is going to keep you from doing that bad thing again. Whereas general deterrence is, we punish you because in doing so we set an example in the hope that other people will not do that same kind of thing in the future. They will be deterred from that kind of behavior by seeing you punished in the way that we're punishing you. That's the deterrence kind of approach. And the third is a little bit more nebulous. It's not quite as established, but some philosophers and others will talk about the idea of punishment as an expression of an attitude. For example, of respect for the victim or even the perpetrator. The expressive role of punishment as a way of sort of manifesting and perhaps also solidifying social values and solidarity of a certain kind. Now, if we think about punishment from a utilitarian point of view, we need to ask which of any of these 3 justifications, and of course, one might justify punishment on more than just one of these. One might think that all 3 of them work, or 2 of the 3 are parts of our justifications. If you're a utilitarian, you might ask, what value is there in punishing? Which of these 3 sources of value might we have as something that's consistent with utilitarianism? And I want to suggest the most natural way of thinking about punishment from the utilitarian point of view is the deterrence approach. That is to say, we're deciding we've got a criminal in our hands. It's clear that he has broken the law. It's clear that something has been done and the act has been perpetrated. We've got him here. Now, what should we do? Well, here we are. It's now time to think about the future. What action is going to be the one that maximizes well-being for the future, that maximizes happiness overall? And the fact that this crime has been committed in the past does not itself have any special value. We need to look forward. And then the question is, well, will punishing this person prevent him from doing this again, or will it prevent others from doing the same kind of thing again? That's the only question that I think that can make sense from the point of view of the utilitarian. If, on the other hand, we can be sure that this person who clearly did a crime, nevertheless is certain never to do it again, we've got reasons from our specialist psychologists or psychotherapists to ensure us that this will not occur, and there's no general deterrence kind of justification in the offing, perhaps because the crime was too subtle or sophisticated or rare, then there won't be any justification for punishing this person. One just has to let him go. That is to say, by contrast, the idea of cleansing the stain in the soul of the perpetrator is not going to make a great deal of sense from the point of view of the utilitarian. The question is, what will produce the greatest overall amount of well-being for the future? So that has an implication that I want you to think about. If you think about what you find to be valuable and worthwhile and justifiable in punishing a perpetrator of a crime, does the utilitarian story give you enough? Or do you think that even if there's no deterrent effect that is likely at all to happen, we nevertheless are obliged to punish somebody because doing so, for example, that person deserves it and the victim deserves this kind of treatment? That is to say that the victim's attacker, for example, get punished in a certain way. That retributivist way of thinking is going to not make a lot of sense from the point of view of utilitarianism. So the utilitarian has consequences for the justification for punishment, which might or might not jibe with your intuitive views about what justifies punishment, and you have to ask yourself, does that somehow put pressure on the utilitarian theory, or should that make me revise my views about what justifies punishment? Again, not something that I'm trying to offer as a direct attack on the utilitarian theory, but something I want to suggest is food for thought, helping you to think about where you stand relative to this complex philosophical doctrine.